Since Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning comes out this Friday, I'm watching every single film in the Mission Impossible franchise. And today I watched the first one for the first time. There's 7 films currently in this franchise, and I've seen Rogue Nation, Fallout, and Dead Reckoning. I haven't seen any of the other ones. I saw half of this movie like a really, really long time ago, but I never finished it. And as somebody who's only seen the latter films of the franchise, it's really interesting to see how this franchise got its start, its roots, you know? Because this film is a lot more spy-y, if that makes any sense. Sure, there's a lot of spy stuff in the latter films, but it feels a lot more like an action-adventure, kind of Indiana Jones, but in modern day, you know what I'm saying? And being that this film came out almost 30 years ago, it's really interesting to see all the different spy gadgets from that quote-unquote era. And I enjoyed this film as a start to everything. Ethan Hunt as a character is really interesting in terms of just like, you don't really know anything about his backstory. It's not important. You just sit with him the moment you're presented his team and everything that goes down and everything that he personally has to deal with. And his really motivations are all you have. You're immediately snapped into this espionage operation that goes awry, and Ethan Hunt has to deal with everything from that point on. I don't know why I don't want to get into spoilers of a 30-year-old movie, but he gets framed. Something happens to his initial team, and he gets framed for it, and he has to work his way around to fix and also get revenge, you know. I think juxtaposed to a lot of the recent entries and how that plot structure kind of works out, it's nice. It's a little bit more grounded, less stakes. Also, this was directed by Brian De Palma, legendary filmmaker, Scarface, Blowout, everything. So there's a lot of great shots in this. There was a split diopter shot that I took a picture of like I was at a fucking concert. It was great. The scene that this is famous for, obviously him dropping from the ceiling, it's done really well. It's silent for most of it. It really builds the tension. Most of the action scenes in this film are great. There's a little bit less than you'd expect, but especially the end, it's really well done. You can kind of tell where they put most of their money. Still a globe-trotting adventure. You still have the team dynamic. Partially. Jon Voight's in this movie, and he's kind of I don't really give a shit. He's like a twist villain. I don't like him as a person, and I don't like him as a character in this. The twist is kind of contrived, and a lot of this stuff is revolving around the actual framing of Tom Cruise. Ethan Hunt, and like just the general MacGuffin is kind of convoluted, which took me out of the film a lot. I feel like that's a problem with certain spy movies and sometimes the Mission Impossible franchise. But I think as a start, a lower stakes, this was really good. I also enjoyed when I wrote my Letterboxd review for this. It gave me this little mission compromise. This review will self-destruct. I fucking love little Easter eggs like that. I can also watch the rest of these movies in a 3 to 4 day span, so follow along if you want to see that. Very excited for Final Reckoning. I'm watching every film in the Mission Impossible franchise before the Final Reckoning comes out this Friday, and today I watched Mission Impossible 2. Did not like Mission Impossible 2. Giving it, who guessed it, a 2. I like this poster. That's a plus. This film was directed by John Woo, who's quite a famous action director. I know him from Face Off, and it came out like 4 years after the first film, and it's stylistically quite different. While the first film is like sly, kind of more James Bond-esque, this film is trying to be as cool as fucking possible. Tom Cruise kind of ore farming through most of it, mainly through the latter half of the movie. He's not even like... For most of it, he's kind of just a side character, honestly. Nye is a new character who's introduced who is an expert thief, but isn't used as a thief in this operation to get this extremely deadly virus and cure for said virus that's manufactured. She's used instead as this romantic ploy to get with this former IMF agent who stole the virus itself. So had a relationship in the past, and honestly, despite the fact that it takes up a decent bit of the screen time, it's not as developed as it really should be. It's kind of hard to care for it, in all honesty. And this idea of a villain of the franchise being a former IMF agent is really good. They don't really get into it at all. Besides him trying to think into the mind of Ethan Hunt and using a gadget, it's not really an important part of his character. He's kind of just another stock villain, which I was kind of disappointed by. I think story-wise, it would have been really interesting to know why he decided to go this path and why he wants this MacGuffin. You only really know his motivations at the very end for some reason. The virus itself, which is called Chimera, I thought was a lot better of a MacGuffin than the first film, which was like the knock list or whatever. Instead of it being a list of secret agents, it's like this tangible thing that has real threats to the world, and I thought that was really interesting. I would have liked to have known this less in an exposition dump done in the third act of the film. Story-wise, I think it was a lot of wasted potential, and to get back to the visuals and directing of it all, I think that, well, it's a respectable vision, it's just not executed properly. Third act action scenes, which I do believe are some of the best in the film, do suffer from a lot of slow-mo and quick cuts, but then throughout the rest of the movie, it's kind of used so sporadically, it's kind of confusing. It's cool in parts, but it also detracts in other areas. One thing I did enjoy about the general different aesthetic was the changes to the score and the theme, which were largely electric guitar based. Like the main Mission Impossible theme was done by Limp Bizkit for this film, and it's fucking amazing. I can really appreciate that. As somebody who's seen 4, 5, and 6, I'm kind of just waiting for the team aspect to get better, because in this film and the first film, it's not as strong as it should be. But we do have Luther, and Luther's great. There's this running gag where his shit, like just expensive clothes he keeps talking about, gets damaged, and it's very funny. I had this tag on Letterboxd called Bad, but we really enjoyed parts, and I'd kind of classify this film under that. As I'm ranking everything, obviously there's only 2 films to rank currently, so this is the latter half. Keep following along if you want to keep watching me rank the rest of the franchise as we lead up to the final reckoning. You know damn well I'm glazing this shit. I've been watching every single Mission Impossible movie before the final reckoning comes out this Friday, and today I watched Mission Impossible 3, baby. I'm gonna keep this short and sweet because I already filmed and edited a video about this movie, and I lost everything due to a TikTok glitch, so I'm in a great mood right now. This is easily the best out of the original 3 movies. Ethan Hunt actually gets a character arc in this. He's three-dimensional. He has personal stakes. He has a wife in this. They completely ignore almost everything that happened in Mission Impossible 2, which is a good thing. Plot is easily the best out of the first 3 movies, including a lot of really good story beats and emotional moments. The main mission of this movie is to stop the villain played by the late and great Philip Seymour Hoffman from selling this ultimate dangerous device called the rabbit's foot. Philip Seymour Hoffman was one of the greatest actors ever, and he delivers a really intimidating performance in the limited screen time that he has in this. Easily one of the better performances as a villain in this entire franchise. The actual MacGuffin itself, the rabbit's foot, does not matter. We never know throughout the entire movie what it actually is, but it's the threat of Philip Seymour Hoffman and everybody that backs him that is the important part, because despite his limited screen time, you feel his presence throughout the entire thing. Ethan and his team are basically chased through the entire movie because of him, leading to some of the best action set pieces of this entire franchise so far. This was the directorial debut of J.J. Abrams, who a lot of people know for Star Trek and Star Wars movies now, but it's a really good showcase as an action movie what can be done to revamp a franchise like this, especially after a kind of dud of a second film. This film introduces a lot of sensibilities of great modern action movies that are present throughout the entire rest of the franchise. Tom Cruise is actually able to do an emotional performance. The team starts to round itself out. There's a couple members that aren't going to show up ever again, but Luther's there, and Simon Pegg is Benji. Oh my gosh, even in the limited screen time that he does have, he starts to develop a relationship that you see with Ethan Hunt that is obviously one of the better parts of the latter films. I really enjoy how all of these films have a different visual style, technically speaking. Yes, there's a lot of lens flares in this, that's J.J. Abrams' staple, but there's also a decent amount of shaky cam, and it's really high contrast, which a lot of people may be a little bit indifferent on, but I think really works for this movie's favor, allowing for a lot of really good tension and an iconic look. Also, Michelle Monaghan is Michelle Monaghan, and as Ethan's fiance and wife, I really enjoyed her presence in the film for the limited time that she was in it. I think this is really when the franchise gets a sense of what it can be and what it can do properly and well. While I haven't seen Ghost Protocol, I've seen every film after that, and there's definitely a consistency which has been lacking in these 3 different entries. But this one was a really good bounce back after the kind of atrocious second film with a more personal story, actual character development, more of a specific idea and vibe that actually works out great for the film, and I'm really enjoying how this franchise is starting to get into a sense of its own. This goes over Mission Impossible 2, and there's a little chunk that puts it over the original Mission Impossible. Keep following along if you want to see me watch and review the rest of the series. I'm watching every film in the Mission Impossible franchise, and today I watched Ghost Protocol, the 4th film. While I thought it was good, I thought it could have been better. Having just watched the 3rd film yesterday, I watched a video for that in my profile. I thought story-wise, action-wise, and just visually, it got nowhere near it, but I do think it's a good entry in the franchise, and it's not particularly weak. The premise of this movie is this team trying to stop the sale of these nuclear codes to a random Russian who's trying to start a war between Russia and the US. But after a large-scale political explosion happens during one of their missions, the point of blame is kind of put onto them, and they're completely disavowed by the US government, left to their own devices as a team. The Ghost Protocol of it all. They have to do everything on their own to complete this mission with the stuff they already had, which I thought as a plot device really helped into this movie's favor. I thought the weakest part of this entire film was the threat of it all was just like the basic like nuclear launch codes that we've seen all the time, juxtaposed to the MacGuffins of the 2nd and 3rd films. I didn't think it was particularly interesting or innovative. Same thing goes for the villain too. After getting such a great villain in Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in the 3rd film, I thought the villain of this film got nowhere close to that. Just kind of a guy with a briefcase. This is less of a personal story for Ethan Hunt this time around. His wife is told to have left him. He starts with the film in a prison, and I was worrying it would ban a lot of the story elements that made the 3rd film really great, and it does come back around to it, but in the end. All of those elements are sprinkled throughout the rest of the film, largely related to Jeremy Renner's character Brandt. This team aspect here, besides the fact that Luther is not in it, I thought was the strongest of the franchise so far. They made the great decision to bring Simon Pegg's character Benji into a main kind of supporting character role, and I thought that was great. His relationship and rapport with Ethan Hunt is just one of the best parts of this franchise for me personally. Really get a good female character in Agent Carter, or Jane, not the Agent Carter, finally, which I think has kind of been one of the weaker points of the franchise so far, especially with Mission Impossible 2. Once again, Jeremy Renner is a new character who was initially meant to take on kind of the main character role later down in the franchise. They didn't end up doing that, but he's a good addition to the main team. I already mentioned that I was kind of less interested in the plot. It's a good enough plot to work. Action-wise, besides the big Burj Khalifa scene, I didn't think that a lot of it was very memorable, because it's really good to see in the beginning of the film involving sneaking into the Kremlin that is unfortunately kind of ruined by this dodgy CGI shot. I think unfortunately it was a lot less visually interesting as the previous entries, more or less I think playing it safe. I was really looking forward to how Brad Bird, the director of the Incredibles films, Ratatouille, The Iron Giant, developed a live action movie, and I think his sensibilities are there, but it isn't as strong as I wanted it to be. It might seem like everything I'm saying is generally speaking negative. I think every aspect of this movie is generally speaking good, it's just not as strong as I wanted it to be, you know? It's a 3.5, but kind of barely. I would have to say this goes under the original Mission Impossible and Mission Impossible 3. All I have left is Rogue Nation, Fallout, and Dead Reckoning, which are films that I've all actually seen. I've finally done with the films I have not seen, but I haven't rewatched any of those since they were in theaters, so I'm really interested to see what I think now after especially watching the first 4 films in the franchise. So follow along if you want to see that. Casually one of the best action movies I think I've ever seen. Continuing to watch every film in the Mission Impossible franchise leading up to the final reckoning, today I watched the 5th film, Rogue Nation. Last time I saw this was 10 years ago when it released in theaters, so refresher definitely helped. This is way better than I remembered it was. The film follows Ethan Hunt and his team chasing after the Syndicate, which is mentioned at the end of the 4th film, which is this group that has planned a lot of international attacks and catastrophes led by this man, Lane. Who has connections to this new character, Ilsa, played by Rebecca Ferguson. Director Christopher McQuarrie, who's directed every film from this point on, just really gets it. Leading to some of the craziest and most well-directed action scenes of this entire franchise for me personally. The opening plane stunt, the opera stunt, the underwater stunt, the motorcycle chase sequence, oh my god. All in such quick succession while still having great character moments. I don't know why I didn't remember any of this. Lane is a layered villain. His motivations are actually revealed pretty early on, whereas a lot of the previous villains are it's always at the end or some dumb shit, allowing the characters of this film to delve even further into his motivations and intentions. Connection to Ilsa, who's working alongside him, but is also working alongside Ethan Hunt and the team, is really good and actually well orchestrated, unlike the second film in this franchise, which kind of has a similar, less well-done approach. The team is more well-rounded and better than it's ever been because all these characters, except Ilsa, have been in multiple movies and have been able to establish a rapport and dynamics, which leads to friendship being one of the central themes of this movie, which kind of shocked me, but it works really well in the context of this film. This film also tackles a lot of plot threads that kind of convene at one point, which I think a lot of the other films have tried but haven't done as well. More noticeable and yet more smooth at the same time. And the thing that really made this movie click for me was the distance in between the huge underwater sequence that happens with Tom Cruise that is already impressive enough that almost immediately leads into this huge car chase, motorcycle chase. I don't know how they pulled it off, but they did. All expertly directed. Honestly, I think one of the greatest strengths of this movie is its pacing. And also this film does something that surprisingly a lot of the other entries in this franchise don't do, and actually pays off the ending of a previous film. I had this movie rated at a 3.5 for some reason, and I bumped it up a full-on star. Skyrocketed to the top of my rankings currently, despite the fact I still love Mission Impossible 3. I have just 2 more films before the final reckoning, and I'm so excited. I've completely Tom Cruise brain rotted right now. Follow along to see me continue and complete the ranking of this franchise with this final film. I'm continuing to watch every film in the Mission Impossible franchise before I see the final reckoning. Today I watched Fallout, the 6th film. Plot being Ethan Hunt and his team continuing to chase after what's left of the Syndicate, aka the Apostles, as they plan this nuclear attack, involving 3 plutonium cores that they steal and lose at the same time, and the villain from the previous franchise lurking behind the scenes. Also, a mysterious character played by Henry Cavill joins the team to kind of keep tabs on everybody else for the CIA. When this came out in 2018, I saw this 3 times in theaters. I haven't seen it since, but I think visually this is the most beautiful film in the entire franchise with a more serious tone. All the main staples are there besides Jeremy Renner, with the story being mainly focused on paying off previous stories in the franchise all at once, and it's done really well. Of course, we have the big stunt still there. There's the halo jump sequence towards the beginning of the film, which is just stunning. The helicopter chase sequence in the 3rd act, and this is less of a stunt, but more of just an insane feat of human history. Henry Cavill cocking his arms before getting into a fight. holy shit, never has a man done something so cool yet so off-putting at the same time. He's a cool character in this. If you've seen it, you know the role that he plays in this, and it works really well. A plot device that we have seen in this franchise before, but it's the best way that's been done so far. When I say this movie is beautiful, I'm predominantly talking about the third act, which is one of the best in the entire franchise. The helicopter chase sequence and the way the aspect ratio changes is just mind-boggling for me. And the way that they're able to switch in the third act back and forth between 3 different perspectives is just masterfully done and directed. I do think after watching the previous entries in this franchise, especially Rogue Nation again, I dropped the score from a 4.5 that I had beforehand to a 4. This watch, I just wasn't really as invested as I expected to be, but I still think it is very, very competent. I think this is where my ranking starts to get a little bit controversial because I have Fallout under 3 and 5. It's just something really special about these 2 films that is in Fallout, but just not to the same degree to me. I have one last film, that being Dead Reckoning, of course, that I'm going to watch hopefully tomorrow before I see the final Reckoning and hopefully trust Ethan Hunt one last time. Follow along if you want to see the conclusion of all this. I'm watching every film in the Mission Impossible franchise before we see the final Reckoning. Yesterday, I watched Dead Reckoning Part 1, or just Dead Reckoning. Didn't really like this one as much on rewatch, if I'm being completely honest. The film follows Ethan Hunt and his team traveling all around the world to find these 2 keys that unlock this AI called the Entity to have the ultimate control and to destroy it before it gains control of basically everything in the world. Definitely the most ambitious concept for a Mission Impossible movie, and I think it partially gets it right. Once again, this is basically only one half of a movie. The final Reckoning is technically the second half. So a lot of this movie is kind of just exposition dumping and a lot of talking about how dangerous this entity is, which in parts is cool because you actually you understand the threat, but it's kind of overindulgent. The entity itself, the design and the fact that it's controlling this one guy named Gabriel who has a connection to Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt's past. God, I keep doing that. Is kind of cool in parts and others not really. This movie's balancing a lot. The team is chased by both the villain and these 2 agents who are part of the CIA, I believe. Also dealing with this new person named Grace who kind of reluctantly joins the team. A detail about Ethan's past that's kind of before even the first Mission Impossible movie. With this ambitious concept of AI and just the whole world domination aspect of it, it's kind of a lot. And in 2.5 hours, it's hard to say that anything is particularly underbaked besides maybe the 2 CIA agents. It tackled stuff like this a lot better in previous entries in terms of having a lot of stuff going on and a lot of story beats at the same time, but it's done a lot more cohesively in those other entries with I think this is fairly convoluted at some points, but I'll give it credit. Once again, the action scenes are incredible. Him jumping off of the motorcycle, the train sequence, which is way better than the train sequence in the first film. Also this part 1, I kind of have an issue with part 1s where I feel like it's not a full movie, and I mean obviously, but I feel like if you're doing a part 1, there should be still some sort of resolutions for each little aspect of the character before the big resolution, and they do this in this film. It feels like it could kind of be a complete movie, and I'll give it props for that. Also, this movie's just really fun. The airport sequence, which was one of my favorite parts, and the introduction of the character Grace, Haley Atwell's nothing left to say. Anything that happens in Venice, the little mini car chase that happens, I think this movie is the funniest movie in all the franchise. And then of course the third act, which involves the motorcycle jump and this train sequence, which lasts basically almost an hour. It's a fun watch, but it doesn't reach the heights of the previous entries in terms of me caring dramatically. That's why ultimately I have it above these 3 movies and below these 3 movies, so it's in the middle of the pack in terms of the franchise. When I first watched this film in theaters, I gave it a 4.5, then later on dropping it a little bit to a 4, and when I rewatched it, I unfortunately gave it a 3.5. Still a good score, don't get me wrong. I actually ended up taking some notes when I was rewatching this movie. Some of the stuff I already ended up talking about. Despite there being a lot of exposition, they did a lot of showing, not telling. Some of the dialogue was kind of unnatural. My favorite score of the franchise, I like the way Gabriel talks. I know it's somewhat late, but I'm seeing the final Reckoning today. It's Memorial Day weekend, it's fine. So I'm really excited to see the supposed conclusion in the franchise. Finally watched Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Here are my thoughts. I watched every single Mission Impossible movie leading up to this film's release, and I think it was definitely worth it. And I think as a franchise conclusion and as a part 2, this worked really well. Fairly above Dead Reckoning in terms of storytelling, writing, especially structure-wise. The film, of course, follows Ethan and his team trying to still chase after the entity, find its source code, and kill it once and for all. I think where this film succeeds, besides the action of it, is in its structure and its pacing. This film is a lot more serious than the previous entry, Dead Reckoning, and I think that allows for a lot better writing and natural dialogue between the characters, besides I guess exposition, because of course that's going to be unnatural, allowing for some good character moments and some expected emotional moments that I thought were quite good. Mission objectives is set from the very beginning and all the points along the way, making things I think a lot clearer than the previous entry, which I thought was somewhat of a convoluted start in Dead Reckoning. For an almost 3-hour long movie, I thought the pacing was surprisingly good. I was a little worried when I heard that the first hour was kind of boring, but I didn't think that was the case. That was interesting setup. It helped us learn a lot more about the entity and its goal. Like parts of what they did with the subversion of the main villain from the first film, Gabriel. All I still think part of his character is still kind of just this maniacal villain that's somewhat one note. I think what he's trying to get out of Ethan Hunt and his team this time around is a little bit smarter than the first film. Works better with the plot. While I think the team is a little bit less strong this time around, I think their portion of the film is something that I did enjoy. The team ultimately being led by Simon Pegg's character Benji, which is my favorite character in the franchise. Another thing that comes with this film's structure is Ethan Hunt's almost on his own the entire time. And I did like that split. I think there's some complaints that can come from that because, of course, the Ethan Hunt stuff is a little bit more interesting than the team stuff. But they do both work in tandem, and the parts where it's switching back and forth in a scene between the two sides is some of the best parts of the movie, particularly around the end of the submarine scene. Speaking of that scene, I thought it could have been its own third act. It was so good. It lasted so long in a good way. For me, it's a top 3 action set piece in the entire franchise. 2 main ones of the film are the submarine scene and, of course, this plane scene. When they were advertising the film initially, and this was supposed to be the big stunt, I was somewhat underwhelmed, which is crazy to say now that I've seen the film, because what he does on this plane and on multiple planes at the same time is insane. I think this film ended up, especially this scene, reminded me a lot of the best parts of Fallout. Fallout is one of my favorite entries in the entire franchise. One surprising part of this film, which I thought was pretty good, was the utilization of Angela Bassett's character from Fallout as the President of the United States, which I think really helped to showcase the international and also U.S. threat of this entity. We cut back to it a lot in the film, and these people who are advising her and telling her to do this and not do this. I think it really showcases the threat as everything, all the spy stuff is going on at the same time, of what something like this could do. And of course, it's not like the most realistic representation of it all, but I think it led to another perspective that was somewhat needed. No spoilers, but I think the way this film ends does leave somewhat of a satisfying conclusion, but also a door open, which is not preferable for me. I think it was a cool scene. I think it was a cool way to end the movie. If you're going all out saying, oh, this is the final Ethan Hunt mission, you got to trust him this one last time, I think it could have been handled a little bit better. All in all, I really enjoyed this film. Also, seeing it in IMAX is the only way to see this film. When the aspect ratio changes in the submarine scene, also, this is me, Tom Cruise, maxing during the film. I usually never get popcorn at movies anymore, but I had to. These posters I got were absolutely fucking insane. If you've been following along with the series, this is my final ranking of the franchise. At least for now, I ended up moving Mission Impossible Fallout above Mission Impossible 3, which is where I had it beforehand. Because I felt like Mission Impossible Fallout was a better version of what the Final Reckoning was. But I think realistically, and I love Mission Impossible 3, the Final Reckoning is better. Great fucking time.